G'day everyone, I'm Shawn Livingston from Precision Planting, the Region Manager for Eastern Canada. Welcome to the Great Ontario Yield event from Farms.com. Today we are talking about closing in on higher yields on your operation. So we're out in a farm with a corn planter today, and you know, throughout the last couple of years since I've been in this role in Ontario, we've done a lot of talking about getting eyes on the planter, right? The monitor in the tractor, the Precision 2020 monitors, that's your eyes on the planter. We talked about the fundamental needs of these planters to make sure functionality is as perfect as possible, from hitch height to bar level to parallel arms. You know, we've talked about openers and row cleaners. Basically, in the last couple of years, we've really talked to you guys about setting your operation up for the highest potential possible. You place that seed in the most perfect environment that you can put that seed in. So today, we're going to talk about closing in on those higher yields. And that is the last step of positioning that seed in the ground, right? Every planter in the world has the same functions. You remove residue, you penetrate the soil to open the trench, you place the seed in the trench, and then you destruct the trench so that there's no evidence that you were ever in the field. Okay, so one of the things that I love to do every year is take the planter when you're set up, you think that you're ready to go to the field, and take one row unit and take the closing system off or tie it up so that you can do a strip in the field that's, you know, 50, 100 feet, and then you can come back and evaluate the trenches. Okay, so when you do that, what you're trying to do is you want to look in these trenches. Okay, so you need some tools, right? Tools that I like to use, I use two different seed depth finders. Okay, this traditional seed depth finder is great for finding the seed, right? I can come into a seed trench and I can dig, and eventually I will find that seed. But what did I do doing that? I dug down and I destroyed the entire environment around that seed. I found my depth, I found that it's placed into moisture, but I don't know what the ground's done above that. These other seed depth finders that some of the Precision Premier dealers have, I really like it because you can come in, you can place it across the trench, and then you can pull it back towards you. And what you see there is then you get down to the base of the seed trench, finding the seed to make sure you've eliminated all aspects of that trench, right? You want to eliminate all findings. But before we get to that point, we need to understand what these seed trenches are doing and what we're trying to accomplish, okay? So a traditional closing wheel bolts onto the back of the planter. It's got two rubber wheels or a spike wheel, a dimple wheel. There's multiple different configurations that can go on here. And what are we trying to do? Well, these two lines are going to intersect in the ground and push that soil closed from the ground up. Great system, has its limitations though, right? All closing systems have their limitations somewhere. So you got to evaluate your soil and figure out what the limitation is. So one tool that I love to use to evaluate my trenches is always going to be a square shovel. A square shovel allows me to go in my trench, put it straight down and pull it back. So by using that and looking at my trench, I figured out I have sidewall compaction. Here we are in the start of August. You know, there hasn't been a lot of rain in this area. Ground's still pretty moist. It's after a wheat crop, no tilled in. but the weight of the planter cutting open the trench and pushing to the side has created sidewall compaction, right? So when we look at sidewall compaction, we look in this trench, like it's hard up in these sides, okay? You can see our seed is right there. This is the one that has no closing system, so that's why it's still open. It allows us to see where the seeds are in the trench, and it allows us to look at how much weight we're carrying. And then we need to ask ourselves, can we close this? Can we close this from the bottom up and eliminate all air pockets around that seed? So when they're set and when you're using a closing system, it's good to evaluate all of that. Okay, so this one here, after furrow force, I say all systems have limitations and all systems have set points that we need to look at. So furrow force from precision planting is a two-stage closing system. Our first stage, stitch wheels, okay, these penetrate in the ground, concaved and angled, and what they're doing is lifting the soil back up to fracture it. And when we lift the soil up to fracture it, it eliminates all the sidewall compaction, most of the sidewall compaction, I shouldn't say all. It eliminates most of the sidewall compaction, and it allows the second stage wheel here to push it down, pack that soil, and take all the air pockets out of the soil. And we do that by installing a sensor right here in order to measure the weight and ground contact on these back wheels. When these wheels have ground contact and they have margin weight on them, we know that our first stage wheels are in the ground at the depth that we've set them for. And this is all controlled by an actuator and an airbag on the system. Okay, so the actuator increases and decreases weight into the bag on a row by row basis, okay? And we need to get these set, and we need to always get out of the tractor and do some digging. As we look at this trench here, we can see that this seed goes in to a trench, and we were completely shattered from here up to the top, right? Our planting depth is roughly, you know, we're at about 2 inches there. But in reality, we did not close this trench, as we still have a small sidewall here, okay? So in the case of our setup here, how do I compensate for this? I put my discs in the ground just a little bit deeper so that they penetrate down a little bit farther and they lift and shatter that in. What we're trying to accomplish at the end of it all is to find a seed in the ground at the depth that we are looking for, which should be about 2 inches, and everything around it from where it shoots up to set the crown root is completely loose and a nice mellow path right to the top of the surface, okay? If we don't have that mellow path to the top of the surface, we have potential for these rows to slot back open, right? If we close this trench here and we close it back over, but it's not all shattered, as the sun comes through, it opens back up. How many of you guys have seen an open trench when you've been in the field, when you're walking through the field, right? How many guys have seen that row just open back up? It exposes those roots to an air particle as they're setting, right? It also puts stress in as it can burn off those plants, okay? So we want this closed, but on the other side, if I take this and I just keep crushing this all in, and I restrict that and I compact this top right back in, how many guys have ever seen the plants that come up and crook it over to try and get out of the ground? okay? So your closing system is the last position on this planter to make that seed environment get out of the ground as uniform as possible, okay? Remember that uniformity of emergence is one of the biggest key factors in agricultural these days, right? After 24 hours, we start seeing our yield drop per plant when emergence is delayed, okay? So you've done everything that you can do on your planter, from the drawbar height, from that bar level, to the seed you've picked to put in the hoppers, to the rates that you've picked, to the fertilizer that you're putting down there. You've made this plan, and you've waited until the ground is perfect, and then you go and plant it. But are you closing it? Are you tucking it away in that environment? Okay. I've been out this year traveling a lot of Ontario, and I'll say that I have heard from a lot of growers standing in their shops that, hey, we've had the best planting conditions that we've ever seen. And yet we walk out into their field and their stands are suffering because of the sins of planting. Worked my ground inch and a half. It was perfect, it was ready to go. But at 2 inches, it was still too wet this spring, right? They planted into it. There's sidewall compaction, there's hatchet roots, and we need to eliminate that. We need a nice root system on a 30-degree angle, coming out of that crown root, going down and capturing those plants, okay? That captures water, nutrients, and it utilizes the oxygen that's in the soil. So precision planting furrow force is giving us the eyes on the planter in that last setup, in that closing system. We've put a sensor there that records back to the cap and allows us to see how much weight we have, how much ground contact we have, to know that that seed has been placed and closed off, okay? So reach out to any Precision Planting Premier dealer in Ontario. There's 14 dealers covering Ontario and Quebec, and you can do that by going to precisionplanting.com, dealer locator, entering your address, and they'll give you a list of the closest dealers. You can also reach out to myself at shawn.livingston@precisionplanting.com. Fire me some emails and questions. Right? We've got all kinds of furrow force plots in Ontario again this year. Last year was great. Some of our data was showing pretty good yield responses compared to a traditional closing system, as well as the furrow force plot data at the PTI farm in Pontiac, Illinois from Precision Planting. So feel free to go into the insidepti.com and sign up to get those emails of the agronomic studies that we're doing. So thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoy the yield tour this year, and I hope everyone has a happy and profitable harvest. Thank you.